Hey folks, welcome back to DCS. I thought I'd hop back in VR because Pimax recently said they're actually going to send me out a Crystal Super to compare to the Crystal Light, so I thought I might as well get some more footage done in the Crystal Light. Coinciding with that, Contention have just released a 90s server which has AMRAM Bravos, which is quite exciting because you don't get to use those very often. So what we're going to do is hop in the Viper, get up in the air and just kind of look over the performance of VR and comment on it. So yeah, hope you enjoy, and I'll catch back up with you in a little bit. Alright, so we're taxiing out. If I put the FPS overlay on, you can see that we are getting a 60 FPS locked. I have the headset running at its native resolution, which is 2880 pixels by 2880 pixels per eye. I have game textures in cockpit and out of cockpit on high. View distance is on high, and then everything else is toned down to either its lowest level or turned off. So things like heat blur are where the detail really suffers, but the game is perfectly playable, and as long as the server load doesn't get too crazy, it seems to cope. My system specs are in the video description if you want to check it out. For whatever reason, I'm getting much better performance now than I was the last time I tried VR and DCS. Obviously I've not been around very much lately, but I wonder if there's actually been some tweaks. Let's talk about the headset field of view. So at the moment, looking forwards, I can see the HUD, and I can see all the way down to this little whatever that thing is there. That is in my field of view. When I'm looking forwards like this, it's right at the very bottom of what I can see. The very top of what I can see is just above where it says Contention Automated Server Announcement. So that's the vertical field of view. The horizontal field of view goes to about here. In fact, well, where I'm aiming the helmet sight, when I'm looking forwards, that's the leftmost edge, and the rightmost edge is over there. So if you were going to get that kind of field of view with track AR, you'd more than likely have to zoom out quite a lot. If you zoom out that much, then you get quite a lot of like a fisheye effect, and the fisheye obviously means that detail suffers. Things like flying in form is very difficult when your perspective is warped, and that kind of thing makes the world in VR feel absolutely enormous, and it's one of the things that makes it better for accuracy and actual flight. So doing things like aerial refueling and landing, or even just flying form. What I might do is set up a waypoint to get me back to base whilst we're waiting. So 4214 4214 597, enter. So I think that if you're into flying stuff like this, then I can see no reason why you wouldn't enjoy VR. You're firing at things that are quite far away, you're killing things with missiles. It's quite rare you get into a merge. You're not having to really look behind you too much, although when you do, it's usually just to admire the scenery, which is spectacular. And it runs well when there's not a lot going on, which there rarely is if you're, doing long range stuff with people. For Cold War though, when there's a lot more units, my system struggles. I think you'd probably need at least a 4090, and at least for me, I find it quite difficult to look around. If you're more flexible than me, then it's probably not too much of an issue. And if you've got a better system than me, then I really wouldn't have anything bad to say about how this thing performs. The clarity is perfectly fine. It is slightly difficult to read things like RWS on the radar display. I only know it says that because I already know what it says, but I have to get to about here for it to be really crystal clear. But still, you can't have everything, and I think that anyone with existing, hang about 267. Let's see if we can engage this guy. Okay, I'm going to transition into post commentary here because the fights aren't really the focus of the video for once, and also I die horribly because I don't do Fox 3 stuff very much. Anyway, so the video is intended more as a summary of my experiences and thoughts on the Pimax Crystal Light, and it'll eventually stand as a comparison piece to the Crystal Super, which has actually since arrived, but I haven't unboxed it yet. So it's a review, if you like. I feel that Pimax may have chosen me as an ambassador for their brand because prior to them sending me the Crystal Light, I literally had no VR experience whatsoever. Everything you hear from me regarding the Crystal Light in this video and the Crystal Super in future videos is without another VR set as a frame of reference. Now I feel that that might discredit some of what I have to say because I can't tell you whether it's better than its competitors or not. And as such, I can only go off how I feel about it compared to playing on a 2K 32-inch monitor. But I think Pimax's angle is that someone without a point of comparison can't get all stitch county and anal about what each set offers and just purely go off how transformative it is as an experience rather than a piece of hardware. So after hearing my take, you'll have to let me know your thoughts. So getting into it. Cards on the table, because I don't want you all to discount what I'm saying because you think Pimax have got their claws into me or anything. Pimax aren't paying me for making any videos on their VR sets, but they have supplied me with the sets free of charge. I do earn commission on sales generated from my referral code, which people will obviously only see if they watch my videos. So on the one hand it does benefit me to make the headset seem good, but I don't actually need that commission money because YouTube isn't my day job. So hear me out. I actually didn't even want a VR set before they contacted me. My opinion was that it was solving a problem that I don't think exists. I'm perfectly happy with head tracking, it's my normal, so rocking the boat and adapting to VR has somewhat ruined my groove. I remember feeling similar when I actually got head tracking after using a mouse in my left hand for years prior. So I know that struggle with muscle memory and flexibility and the flow of the fights and everything. It's not VR's fault that I'm not as comfortable with it, it's just because I'm not used to it, and if I gave it enough time then I would adapt perfectly fine, just like I eventually forced myself to adapt when I got Track AR. Another reason I had no interest in VR was that I tend to bind a lot of things to my keyboard, and I thought that it would be such a chore to try and find keys when you can't see them. You probably noticed in the video before I stepped in with post-commentary that there were moments where I cycled through the wrong binds a few times before finding the right ones, but there are obviously ways around this. A lot of people I've spoken to have bought additional peripheral controls like MFDs or button boxes that are easier to feel around without looking, or on the simple end they just literally stick stuff on their keyboard so that they can find reference points on it more easily. So it's not exactly a world-ending problem to solve. The reason that I've not done that is because these VR sets are on loan and I'll have to send them back, so adapting my setup for a blind version of myself doesn't make much sense long term. There's also the point I made earlier about just using the mouse when you're in VR, because you can just point your face at stuff. With the one-to-one tracking, there's no acceleration in the movement like there is in Track AR, so it's actually quite easy to just click stuff with your face. The next thing that put me off VR was the performance hit that it costs your system, and that is unfortunately one that you'll have to work around almost regardless of what your system specs are. Personally, I feel that the sacrifice of visual fidelity for my hardware to run VR isn't quite worth it. I prefer a prettier game because as immersive as VR is, on a sliding scale of real jet at one end to sitting in an office on the other, VR isn't really that much of a leap towards immersion over head tracking, in my personal opinion. I know that I'm sat in my office on a swivel chair at a desk. There's just no shattering that illusion. Then lastly, because I make content on YouTube, I've always felt that VR footage doesn't look as good from a viewer's perspective, so I actually feared falling in love with VR and having to force myself back to head tracking for the sake of content creation. It's the same reason that I've never played Minecraft. As an adult enjoyer of Lego, I would just be addicted and never stop, so I've had to save myself, and I've never tried it. I actually used to make airsoft videos on YouTube about 10 years ago, which I've since unlisted all of on the channel. But airsoft has the same problem as recording in VR. What I can see with both of my eyes can't ever perfectly match what the viewer can see from my recording, so context can be lost, and it can complicate the editing process. I've been through that pain before, so I wanted to avoid it happening again. But when Pimax came along and offered me a free VR headset, yeah, obviously I'm going to say yeah, so of course I agreed. Who wouldn't? I wanted to test if all those things I assumed about it were actually true. Now, Pimax didn't demand anything of me for this. They don't ask to review my videos before I publish them, they don't require me to post anything that I don't want to post, or say things that I don't want to say. They also offered to help me get things set up properly when the set arrived, but I actually refused and kept them at arm's length because I wanted to have the same experience setting it up that you guys might if this is your first VR headset as well. So here's the negative spin. Having no VR experience, I went through hell fiddling with settings and intense Google sessions of learning what does what, how to tune things the most efficiently. For literal months, my Discord mod chat was renamed VR Victims Rehabilitation Centre because it felt like every time I adjusted something there'd be an issue with something else. There'd be a game update that altered something, one of the third-party softwares would react weirdly to a change that I made and ruin what was good about my price settings. It was honestly a nightmarish pain in the arse. My mod team became counsellors, therapists. They kept me sane. When I first received the Crystal Light, it felt like there was an absurd amount of additional software that I had to download to get it to work. There was OpenXR, there's Quad Views, there's Steam VR. I can't even remember all of them now, but there was like 6 additional programs on top of Pimax Play, which you need to just run the headset. It genuinely angered me that the process of setting the damn thing up was so needlessly convoluted. Why couldn't they just roll all this shit into their in-house software that they sell with the headset? Like, it seems actually mental to me that they sell you such an expensive piece of kit and then it needs software made by other people, made by members of the community to actually get the most out of it. Like, that's probably the biggest downside that I have for this whole piece of kit. But don't hang on to that thought too much, because since then they have actually updated Pimax Play to account for a handful of things that I downloaded other programs to solve. So I now only have Pimax Play, Quad Views and OpenXR installed, which is why I can't remember the other things, because I just don't use them anymore. And I have now largely wrapped my head around setting things up, and it is actually quite straightforward if you read around it a bit first. So all that out of the way, let's go on to how I actually feel about it. I see a lot of comments online all the time where people say that once you go VR, you won't go back. And I honestly wonder if I'm weird in some way, because I genuinely don't feel that it's that amazing. What it makes me think instead is, well, that person must have not set up head tracking very well, or maybe they come from using a hat switch or a mouse to look around. Because compared to no head-based way of moving the camera around, VR would be mind-blowing. And if you start with VR, then there's no way that you'd ever give it up for something less. In the same way that if my head tracking broke, I would just stop playing the game, because I wouldn't be able to cope with controlling the camera in a different way, because once you get used to something, that's it, you're locked in and you're basically trapped using it forever. So I can see why long-term VR users would feel like how I feel about Track AR. But my perspective is one of being actually very happy with Track AR for pushing 6 years now, and VR from my perspective comes with worse performance, worse visual fidelity, more difficulty checking my 6, and more difficulty seeing my keyboard, and that's quite a lot of negative stuff. On the positive side, it is really quite amazing to feel like you're within the plane, having it wrap around you and being able to really lean around and into all the little spaces without restriction. There is really no way to explain how awesome that experience is. But
your butt.
My butt.
Your butt.
That's right, my butt.
Ugh.
My butt. My butt.
you know, once you've done it a few times, once it's normal, for me, and I know this isn't going to massively sell it to anyone, but VR feels a bit like going to see a film in 3D at the cinema, or 4DX. It's like a novelty thing that doesn't really do much beyond impress you a little bit. I feel that all the people constantly banging on about VR being amazing have actually caused this indifference in me, because they hype it up so much that it can't ever possibly match your expectations. Now, all of that said, hopefully you'll agree that there's no way that I'm a Pimax shill, and we can get into what's good about the headset, you know, with sincerity, and you'll actually believe what I'm saying. And it is actually quite simple. No matter how annoying it is to set up, and no matter how much I suck at tracking people behind me through fights, how the game has to look slightly worse, and my frames drop a little bit too much at times, the one thing that makes VR absolutely epic is the raw scale that you get to experience from it. That is the one thing that kept me pushing to get it to run well. The drive to keep tweaking it. Fighter jets are massive, and VR lets you see them for what they are. People say it's the depth perception that will wow you, but it's not that. It's the scale. Aerial refueling isn't hard in 2D because you lack depth perception, it's because you're looking at what's happening on a screen. In VR, you're looking at what's happening from within a fucking fighter jet. And holy fuckballs, are those tankers massive when they're 30 feet away. It's hard to miss the boom when it's 8 times the size of your entire body. So in summary, will VR improve your game? Well, no, not really. Will it look as good? No. Will it run as well? Hell no. Will it make your neck hurt? Yeah, it probably will. At least if you're 30 plus and not an athlete. Will you keep coming back though? Yeah, you will. It's like a drug, and this is the sell for me. I remember when I first got into DCS, and I felt genuine anxiety about hopping into multiplayer for the first time. The apprehension of not knowing how to behave, the fear of getting something wrong, doubt about how my IFF system worked, and the shame of team killing people. It made me sweaty, and I'd only hop on with a friend so that the load could be shared and make me feel better. VR does the same thing, not because of any of that stuff, but because the stakes feel higher, the fights feel more personal. You're not just joining a server in VR, you're climbing into a multi-million-dollar fighter jet. You can see it around you, you can lean under all the sticky outy bits, and you can lean around the HUD glass. It's genuinely otherworldly. Imposter syndrome. It gives me imposter syndrome. That is the closest thing that I can align it to. It feels like you shouldn't be there. Honestly, I can't even put it into words. Is that a feeling that will wear off? I actually don't know. Even though I've had this headset for about a year now, the Pimax Crystal Light. Pimax actually said that they'd only loan it for 2 to 3 months. I'm not sure if they forgot. Don't tell them. But they have now sent me the Super as well, so I have both. So I'll have to keep updating you on whether the feeling wears off or not. Is VR a bit of a gimmick, and is it madly expensive? Yeah, I guess. But here's the thing, right? Have you ever been driving your car and it's just kind of struck you that the freedom that gives you is actually kind of wild? Like, it's actually really fucking cool to have the privilege to drive a car. I learned to drive quite late, and I actually now teach people to drive. That is my day job, and I still get this feeling every once in a while where it's a sunny day, you're on a windy country lane, and you're just enjoying yourself, and you think, this is actually fucking cool as shit. That feeling is VR, and even if it costs a lot of money, and even if that feeling only comes along every once in a while, it just kind of makes you giggle to yourself. Like the privilege that you get to experience that is, you can't put a price on it. And that is my sell for Pimax. I don't know how well other headsets achieve the same thing. I guess really it's a sell for VR in general. And if you kind of get that, if you agree with me, then hopefully the link, my link in the description that lets you buy one of these, hopefully you'll opt for that because of our shared experience, that you agree with me and that you like what I'm saying. If you want to buy a Quest 3 instead, knock yourself out. Like I said, I don't need the commission money, but there isn't anything bad that I can say about the actual hardware that Pimax have sent me. It does what it says on the tin. You've seen the footage, you can make up your own mind, but that's my sales pitch. Check out the links in the description if you want to check out the Pimax VR store. Check out the Air Models link as well in case you want like a desk ornament or something. Consider joining the membership scheme if you want early access to future uploads. Subscribe if you want to see more, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.